Hey YouTube, how's it going? Kevin Cleary here with a knife video. Today I have the Realsteel H9 Taken. Very, very large knife from a company that's actually doing some pretty good stuff. You guys know I've got the H6 from Realsteel and the T101 Thor, both of which I do like and have recommended. And so because of my experience with those, I thought, you know what, I like the design, their track record in terms of, quality and in terms of just ergonomics and usefulness and stuff is quite good. So let's go ahead and pick one up. And I did, and I've been quite impressed with it. I have carried this and used it quite a lot. I'm very impressed with it overall. The one big drawback is this is a very large knife, and probably for most of you watching, if you're just looking for, one good folder, okay, I probably wouldn't say this would be the way to go, okay? If someone just called me and said, hey, I don't have a knife or my knife broke and I need something else, would I recommend the H6? Absolutely. Would I recommend the H9? Not exactly. It's not the most practical option. However, if you're a collector and if you like knives and if you like to carry big knives, this is a great one. Certainly it's a little different, and if you're that kind of person, and I kind of am, I like to have something that's just a slight twist that everyone doesn't have the exact same thing that I've got. And so this is definitely a knife that is different. The other thing I like about it by way of introduction is Realsteel, a lot of their designs up to this point have been fairly safe. You know what I mean by that? They've been knives that you can take a look at it and go, yeah, that's going to have a fairly broad appeal. Most people are going to like the size and shape and weight and all of that. This knife, though, is quite different. And when you do a knife like this, number one, it shows a little bit of boldness and a little bit of ingenuity. Number two, it says, hey, we're making knives not just for, we're not going to just stick to the mass market where we're trying to make knives that the average everyday person who maybe doesn't care much about knives, just needs one, is going to care about. We're willing to make some knives that maybe people who are a little more into the hobby are interested in. And so this is kind of cool because it's a bit of a departure from the safe for Realsteel. A knife like this can totally flop because, people may look at it and be like, whatever, that's ridiculous. So that's sort of my overall take on the knife. That's my introduction. Let's get into some of the specifics and also our comparisons. Obviously, when we talk about size and weight, that's going to be the major standout about this knife. It is very large. It is 9 and 11/16 overall. The blade is 4 3/8, and that's measured from here, okay? And so you're getting every bit of that in cutting edge. And the handle is about 5 3/8. So very, very large knife. Almost, that 11/16 is literally 1/16 away from 9 3/4. Okay, not the biggest knife I've had, not the biggest knife I've carried, but it is a big one. All right. So, by the way, on that, 6.2 ounces, which honestly is not that bad when you look at how much material is here. The handle material is almost not almost, it is. It's 5/8 of an inch thick, so it's a little thicker. You can see though, there's a lot of G10. There's a lot of steel just in this blade. There's, you've got a backspacer here. You've got your steel liners. Now these steel liners, when I zoom in a second, I'll show you, but they are heavily milled out to save on weight. And even with that milling, this is still a pretty hefty blade. Okay, so that's size and weight. Let me say this, it's a big knife. All right, so because of that, it's got some weight. In terms of its actual size to weight ratio, it's not that bad. Okay, so let's go and do some comparisons because one of the things I will say about this knife is it's larger than you think, at least for me. I did not expect it to be quite this big. I knew it was big, but I consider a Strider to be a big knife, and this makes the Strider look like, sort of a medium EDC knife. This is an SMF, so quite large. I have a Recon 1, and these are knives, I'm trying to think of knives that are going to be familiar to a lot of people. So a Recon 1 is a very big knife. Most people don't go with the large, or at least a lot of people don't go with the large, they go with the medium. You can see the H9 Taken is quite a bit bigger than the Recon 1. I will say this, the Recon 1 is only a little over 5 ounces, which means that the weight on it is very, very good. Here's another very large knife. This is the Cold Steel Large Espada. And I don't normally get this out for comparisons, but this knife is so big. I think right now in my collection, this is the only knife I have that's, or this is the sort of the next biggest knife. I do have a Raja too, but that's hardly comparable to anything else. And now let's get out some of the other Realsteels. So there's the H6. Still love this knife, by the way. And the T101 Thor is the smallest knife I have here. This is about the same size as a Para 2, so that should give you an idea. So there's size and weight on this knife for you. It is a big knife. It's a heavy knife. It carries very comfortably, but I will say because of that size, it's maybe not the most practical option for everyone who's watching. All right. Sorry, my coffee's not done yet, so I've got to keep the caffeine flowing. Now, let's zoom in on this a bit and we'll talk about some of the details. Okay, so there's that very large sheep's foot blade, stone washed, nice thin edge geometry. It is a flat grind, good thin edge geometry. This is a real cutter. It cuts really, really well. And I've got to say this, 14C28N is amazing steel. Yeah, it's kind of a budget steel. It's usually, what would you say, like one step up from your typical budget steel, but a lot of these Realsteel knives that have it can be bought for the same price as a Tenacious or a Rat 1. So, you know, they're generally in that market. Now the H9 is a little more expensive. Like if the, you know, let's say this is around 40 bucks, this might be around 50. And I actually think when I looked on Knife Center yesterday or the day before, these were $41, so not bad, and especially considering that steel is a very good steel. Takes a wickedly sharp edge and holds it certainly better than a lot of the steels that maybe you've tried. It's definitely going to hold better than AUS 8 or 13C28, I mean AUS 8 or 8CR13 MOV or a lot of those budget steels, 440C that you've tried. Is it as good as, you know, VG10 or 154CM? Not quite there, but nearly. Okay, very, very good. And Realsteel seems to do a pretty good job with their heat treatment as well. So I've been very, very happy with the 14C28N. Probably my favorite budget steel. Now, the blade on this, I've already pointed out. Oh yeah, it does have that very nice stone wash. Just take a look, since we're zoomed in here, on the deployment method. It's not a stud, but a disc, thumb disc. Yeah, this blade, very, very functional. You've got a point here that can do a lot of that fine detailed work for opening packages and stuff. Now, one problem with that kind of stuff is if you are here, you know, you've got all that distance to the tip, but this blade is actually wide enough that you can get up and do some work like this, and I have done that. You've got enough material in the blade that it gives you some real estate for your other fingers. Now, obviously, we wouldn't even be having this discussion if this was a 2 or 3 inch blade. I understand that, all right? But sometimes you need more reach than that. Now, nothing else I really need to say about the blade. You can see it has just a little bit of belly, and from a cutting standpoint, if you are working with this here, you can see that there's a little bit of angle required, but most of the blade, certainly from my pinky out, does come into play. Let's say you're cutting on a cutting board or against a hard wooden surface, you know, you're doing some kind of bushcrafting stuff. It's still, you know, the ergonomics on this, or the blade setup in terms of where it is in relation to your fingers, is fairly good. All right, let's talk about lockup and deployment. I'm going to stay zoomed in because there's a couple things I want to show you here, but this is a liner lock. Reasonably good sized steel liners, heavily milled out. Let me see if I can show you that from this angle somehow. Let's see here. Yeah, this is the side you're going to be able to see better. It is a full backspace, so there's not a lot of light gets in there. Around there you can probably see, but there's huge squares cut out of these liners, so it's very, very heavily milled out. Lock is very, very smooth. It's not a ball bearing pivot, but it is nice and smooth, and you can be fairly quick. Although zoomed in this close, I'll never get it to work for you. It is quite smooth though, and it will drop. Notice that. There you go. Detent is fairly good. One thing I will say about this is the way these G10 scales are put on, you don't have access to the pivot screw. So if you wanted to adjust the pivot screw, you're going to have to take off the G10 scale and then make your adjustment after that, which is a little bit annoying. The other thing about this is, and here's a complaint, it's not, in terms of function, I've never had a problem with it and I've got quite a bit of use on this. However, notice how the relief cut here is, number one, exists. It's fairly thin, but then notice they've done another cut here in the G10 scale. So they kind of cut back about a 1/16 of an inch and just removed some material that allows you to move this liner lock out of the way so you can close the blade. Okay, it essentially gives just a little bit more space for the liner lock to move over. Here's the problem though. Right here is where there's the relief cut and then a bit of a bend. Now, this is going to be the weakest point in this lock bar, and they've removed the G10 from behind it so that now you've left the weakest point of the lock bar totally unsupported. From an engineering standpoint, I don't like that. In fact, this knife, and really most liner locks, you could probably skip the relief cut altogether and have a more robust lock. Sure, it might be a little more difficult to push over with your finger, but I think most people would be happier with a lock that's maybe a little bit stiffer, but more robust rather than, yeah, this one is easy to actuate, no question. But you know, there you can actually see how, watch the liner as it comes up here and see how it bends down toward the liner, then bends back up under the blade. So you literally have got this almost set up like a spring so that when you apply pressure to the blade, you've already started the bend. So it seems to me that was not a great design decision. This could have been, you could have left the relief cutout altogether and then left your cutout in the G10 until, you know, about this point or something, so that down here where there's more pressure, it would have been more well supported. Anyway, that's my slight discrepancy there with the liner lock. Not a big deal, but I did want to point that out. So let's get on to the rest of the handle. I may zoom out just a little bit. You can see how I can't get the whole knife in frame. There you go. So let's move on to the handle. Very nicely milled G10. Kind of this, you know, if I'll show you this way, you can probably see the sort of triangle pattern to it. Extremely comfortable in hand. The pocket clip, this is actually a real achievement. The pocket clip is kind of on the top of this ridge. So at first glance, I'm like, well, that pocket clip may be uncomfortable. But when you actually grip the knife, you would not know this knife even has a pocket clip on it. It really, really lands in a good spot. And all the different grips you may want to do are actually very, very comfortable. Even for sort of a draw cut or a pull cut, every variation on grip is very, very comfortable. Nicely, I love the aesthetics on this. The lines in the G10 are really, really nice. It is a G10 backspacer, and notice how they've done the lanyard by, you know, doing a post here and a cutout. And that's a really nice touch. It allows for a very clean knife. Notice how, you know, just these very clean lines. It looks like, you know, maybe the folding knife that somebody on the Enterprise would use or something, kind of a little bit of modernistic look to it. By the way, notice how you've got this line that comes up the handle and then continues through the blade. Very, very well done in terms of just the aesthetics of this knife. And it's even more pronounced on the show side where there's no pocket clip interrupting the flow of this knife. Really, really nice looking blade. So that's the handle construction and the handle design. Yes, it is a little heavy, but just the sheer amount of G10 is kind of going to necessitate that. And it's a big knife. Like, you're carrying a knife that's getting close to 10 inches long. So you'd expect a little bit of weight from that. All right. So there you go, guys. Oh, one complaint that you may have is if you're a lefty. Now, I'm not, and I far prefer to carry right side tip up. If you don't, though, if you would like to carry left side tip up or tip down or anywhere else, that's not an option. There's only the single position for that pocket clip. Okay. Overall, I'm very impressed with this knife. It's big, no question. A little big to be considered considered really, really practical. You know, even the Recon 1 is kind of pushing the limits, and this is quite a bit bigger than that. Now, I have carried this and used it in public and had no issues at all. But but that may not, you know, this is a big blade and it really stands out because of the color and everything, and it's just a big knife overall. So there is that issue of practicality, but otherwise this is a great knife. The function is good, the fit and finish, all the things sort of coming together where you know, when you kind of consider how it's built, when you consider the design, when you consider the strength and durability of it, the steel, all of that, really, really well done. And if you're interested at all in this knife, and if you can, you know, see yourself carrying a blade of this size, which is substantial, okay, I don't think you'll be disappointed at all by the Realsteel H9. There you go, guys. I hope you enjoyed the video, and we will talk to you soon.